All right. Aaron, I wanted to start the podcast with something that I don't often hear you talk about,
Okay.
or I didn't hear you talk about until like a few weeks ago. So you built the largest for-profit music lesson provider in central Wisconsin, and it's clear that you started it with a passion for violin. So what about building your business and maintaining the business has caused you the most sleepless nights?
Boy. One thing. Well, so yeah, I guess I can talk about what helped me sleep better. There
Mhm.
was a point. Okay, so it's like I think when you're building any business, beyond being a solopreneur, you're basically balancing supply and demand. It's like if you have people working for you, you need to find people who will work for you. In the culture that you create and the rate that you set, and you'll need to find people who will purchase from you at the rate that you set, and also in the culture that you provide. And so it's supply side and demand side marketing. I remember this was like right before the pandemic. This is why the pandemic. One of the reasons the pandemic was so frustrating for us is that I felt like we cracked that nut right before the pandemic, where it was like, okay, we know
Oh,
exactly how to attract instructors, and we know how to attract students. Like we had figured both of those out, and there was a lot of stress on the way to figuring that out. That I think answers that question. I haven't lost sleep over that business in a while. Like I'm losing sleep over new businesses now. So yeah,
yeah.
does that answer your question?
Yeah. I would say, with the business, like, what would you say is different about the music industry than like other businesses?
Okay, that's a good question. What's different about it? Okay, I think one thing that's true about the music business is that people love it so much, and a lot of people go into it because they love it and they don't think it through as a business so much. And so I feel like you're competing with a lot of people who do that, in addition to people who know business well. And I feel like that's not, so in other words, the barrier to entry is much lower than it is in a lot of other businesses, I guess it is essentially the short answer to that. Um,
Yeah, it's high competition, but the competition isn't as good as kind of what you're saying.
right. Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's still competition, it's
Yeah.
still, dilutes the marketplace. So I think if there's anything that I would point to, it's probably that.
I feel like the other thing with the music industry that I don't know if you run into is I feel like it's very relational.
Okay.
Like if you know a guy, you're gonna pick them over the other person.
Mm.
And so almost everyone knows someone who plays an instrument. It's just whether or not it's your instrument. Is that an issue or
I think I think all businesses are relational. The question is the music industry more relational than others? In a way, it is. So I see it as being very relational because, in the music lesson business, students get really attached to their teachers. And that's why, without question, the hardest thing, maybe the thing that still keeps me up at night about the music business is when teachers leave, because that happens. It happens more often than we would like. And then we have to tell students, and basically you're saying, yeah, there's a new relationship coming, and people get really comfortable
yeah.
with their relationships. But I think that, I think if you understand marketing, then it's essentially the art of building relationships with people that you haven't met. And so I think a lot of what we did was figuring out how to do that. Figuring out how to start a relationship, start a conversation with people that didn't know us personally, to help them feel comfortable with us. So I think yes and no, is my answer to that. But yes, there are a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I know my uncle plays the guitar, my friend plays the violin, and so we'll start lessons with them. I think that for a program like ours, we do sometimes get people who have tried that, and they're looking for something more stable, more committed. So yeah, I think that's true.
Would you say? So when you have a teacher turnover
Mhm.
or like a music lesson, what's kind of the process there? Like walk me through that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So, ideally we hear about it, pretty far in advance, and most of the time we do. Teachers are very good about letting us know, a month or two in advance. Hey, my life is shifting. It's moving on. I'm going to be leaving you. And then, yeah. So, the relationality that you mentioned, I think that's been really, really, really important in helping us find teachers, because then we do ask our networks. We ask our musician friends, we ask professors at the university, um, we ask the other teachers, who are some people that who might be interested in this, and um, that is often where where they come from, and then it's a matter of easing the transition between the teacher who's leaving and the teacher who's coming in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you run into a lot of issues of like students reject it and then leave, or like reject the new teacher in a sense?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I said, people take music lessons for all sorts of reasons. Yeah, some people, like, the primary motivation is they are there and they want to get better in an instrument, but that's far from the only thing that attracts people to music lessons and keeps them in. Some people really like the culture that we have. Some people really like the performances. Some people like the friends that they make in the program, and then people get really attached to their teachers, and so sometimes, yeah, sometimes the transition, I guess you would say, isn't successful, and the student is saying, "Yep, there isn't enough keeping me here anymore." So yeah, it happens, but
Okay.
not. Uh, on the whole, it doesn't, which is why we've been able to grow as we did.
Okay. Okay. That would make a lot of
Yeah,
sense. Do you do like, I guess, organization-wide concerts then?
yeah,
Is that something you do?
hmm
Okay. So how does that work? Because I
sure,
know, do you do a lot more jazz, classical? Like what kind of genre pieces are you playing? What?
yeah. So genre wise, uh, a lot of people are beginners, and so there's sort of a beginning. It's like the method book repertoire. So for example, a pianist will start with. Have you ever taken music lessons, Andrew?
I have.
Okay, what
Yeah.
did you play, or what do you play?
I played trumpet.
Trumpet. Okay. Did you take private
Yeah.
lessons?
I did take private lessons for a while.
Okay.
I only did it for 2 or 3 years, and then I just played in the high school band. I played in wind ensemble, which is the tryout band, and then I played in jazz.
Okay. Very cool. So yeah, so like most, I think there's probably more piano students than anything else. So I'll just refer to a couple of those. So if you take piano lessons, your instructor will likely recommend that you get a series of method books. Really popular today are the Alfred books, or the Faber Piano Adventure books, and really what those are designed to do is to help the student learn one skill at a time, so that they can put them together and become a proficient musician. And they really draw from a lot of different genres. So you do have a very really satisfying mix of classical, jazz, popular, sacred, folk music, in all of those. So you hear a lot of that um, on the recitals, and really once you get proficient with those, you can go in a lot of directions. So some people do gravitate toward classical. Our guitar students like to play rock and folk and country songs, and vocalists, cover a wide variety of repertoire. So yeah, it's always like a really fun eclectic mix. Really the recitals, which is what we call them, and we do a couple of those a year in addition to a whole lot of other community events. Those are, it's really as much, if not more, about showcasing the progress of the student and their growth as a musician. And a creator, as it is the music that you hear. So you'll hear a wide variety of music from people who have really grown in the process of practicing and rehearsing it and presenting it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really one thing that's really like nice about music is you can go in so many different
Mhm.
directions. There's not a one size fits all kind of glove.
Uh-huh.
Like I know I started out on trumpet and then I kind of transitioned to guitar
Yeah.
just because I'm a metalhead and like no metalhead plays trumpet. Like that doesn't work.
Okay.
So so I play guitar
I see.
essentially. I'm very mediocre at it at best, but
Sure.
here we are. So there's definitely a lot of different ways you can go with music. And the
Mhm.
other thing that's really nice about it is once you kind of learn how to count and how to read notes.
Mhm.
And I mean, reading notes is different for each instrument, but by and large, it's mostly the same
Yeah.
because you just have to learn the fingerings or whatever
Yeah.
you call it for everything else.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, once you figure that out, it's pretty much go ahead, like figure it out, go have fun,
Yeah.
learn.
Right.
Would you say, with that being said, is there a certain point at which people kind of stop taking
Mhm.
lessons because they get to a point where they just want to like play around their instrument? Because you always have to do, in a sense, you always have to work on your instrument to a certain extent, but then
Yeah.
the rest of it is just kind of creative outlet, if you will.
I think, I mean, the short answer is no. I mean, people do stop taking lessons, but, really the question there is like, should you or can you ever stop taking lessons? And like, even the professional musicians I know, who are serious about improving, because it's like everyone does professional development, they can always find other people to have like master classes with or go study with for, a semester, take a sabbatical, and so it's like, I feel like at a certain point, that's what the education becomes. It's like where you have, such professional proficiency. You're just looking for refinement, new ways to think, new ideas. I think, in my world, like having a, community music school, people stop taking lessons because they, they, they run out of time because other activities are interfering, as they grow older and, um, they've gone through a certain point in their childhood where they try a whole lot of things, like be it different sports and music programs, drama programs, all sorts of things, and then they'll come a time when it's like it makes more sense to focus on just a couple of them. That's a reason that people stop taking lessons. Sometimes they just lose interest. It's like it's just not for them. It's not inspiring them anymore. But and this is a really cliche thing to say, but it's like I do notice a lot when people learn that I'm a musician, and I'm talking about other adults. They so often they'll tell me about their musical experiences, because like they're very proud of them. And what I usually hear is, well, I wish I had continued to take lessons, because like they would have this, this really beautiful gift, this skill to share, and enjoy themselves. So I would say, especially about piano, I say this, but no one ever regrets the piano they know, only the piano they don't. So, yeah. So I guess short answer, you can always keep learning on your instrument. It's only a matter of priorities, like it is for everything else in life.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Just a lack of priorities is kind of, I shouldn't say lack of, but like a deprioritization of it.
A difference in priority. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
because like everyone has priorities, right? Like everyone's prioritizing something. So it's it's a matter of what you're prioritizing. So yeah.
Yeah. Aaron, you also, so I'm just going to switch topics here, but you mentioned that you seem to believe that stagnant growth, cultural dysfunction, and a bunch of other work problems are associated with leadership, not the strategy.
Yeah.
So if a leader is sufficiently introspective, what can they do to prevent their business or group from becoming stagnant or dysfunctional?
Okay. Yeah, that's that's a shift. And oh, it says recording stopped. Did you get that?
But it did not.
Oh, no. Okay.
It says still recording for me.
Oh, okay. It says it on my end. All right. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Can you ask that question one more time?
Yeah.
So
You seem to believe that stagnant growth, cultural dysfunction, and a bunch of other work problems were associated with leadership and not strategy. So what can a leader do if they're sufficiently introspective to help kind of prevent this stagnant and dysfunction?
Sure. Yeah, I think
Stagnant, right?
right. Yeah, it's a huge question. I think ultimately every problem is a leadership problem because every organization has someone or some group of persons that's in charge of it. Um, if leadership is weak, and like you could also think about it this way: it's like if an organization is moving forward, someone is driving it forward, and it could be it could be a group of people who are sort of stepping up to do it. But typically, you can go into an organization and ask, okay, who's in charge here? Who's leading it? Who is responsible for driving this forward? And so, if there are problems, and a problem is sort of a wide categorization, and really a problem is simply a result that you don't want. It's something that's happening that you would rather not happen, or it's something that isn't happening that you would rather be happening. It's really just those two. There's always a reason there's always an answer to the question, why is that happening? And so really all leadership is in a very primary sense is keeping track of those two things, the things you have that you don't want, the things you want but you don't have, and getting to the root causes of what those are. And I do find that tends to be an introspective process. It's a process that comes from paying attention and making observations, collecting the right data, and then being introspective about how your personal strengths and influence can be brought to bear on the issue.
Yeah. So here's kind of my basic understanding of that. It's like, as a leader, your job is to kind of find what's underneath the surface, not what's on the surface. And so you can solve what's underneath, whereas like the on the surface, everyone in the group knows exactly what it is. Everyone can, I guess, take a role. You don't necessarily have to like specify. Like a lot of times when I'm leading someone, or I'm leading a group of people, most of the time, if it's something super simple, super on the surface, it's solved like that. I don't even have to ask, but it's that underlying stuff that as a leader, you kind of have to, I guess, diagnose, if you will.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the right way to phrase that?
I think so. Yeah, I think there's a lot to that. So yeah, like the surface and the deeper causes. I think maybe the direction I would take that is I think that inevitably the leader is the most connected member of the organization, and it's like, even if it's and as I'm saying this, it's like, okay, could you find a leader of whom that's not true? And if you find a leader of whom that's not true, I can almost guarantee you that that's a highly dysfunctional organization. Like a leader that is not the best connected, the most in touch with everything that's going on in that organization, it's like that's a recipe for disaster. But I think that, part of the job description and sort of just the inevitability of being a leader is that you are going to have the widest vision in that group, not even like of the future, but just of what's going on. And you're going to have the most places to look for issues. You're going to have the most people to talk to, right? Essentially, you're sort of the central hub of that network. And so I think that state, like that's essentially what allows a leader to see into everything that they do. And other people in the organization simply just don't have that perspective. They can see a lot of the symptoms, they can kind of talk about what they feel from their perspective, but the reason that they're not going to be able to see beneath the surface is they just don't have the perspective that the leader has inevitably. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's essentially just ignorance, but like not like, I don't mean that in like a mean sense. I mean that in like you just don't know.
Sure. Yeah, let's say some more about that.
So kind of my idea there is that the people in like everyone in a group, it doesn't understand everyone else's perspective.
Yeah.
Right. They don't have all the information of each individual person. And it's the leader's job there to synthesize all of the information that they get, to bring it all together, to explain it to the group. Because especially when you're a leader and you're delegating something, for example, like I always think of Boy Scouts just because I was in Scouts for the longest time. But one of the things that you would do is you'd each pick a different task. And so whether that be setting up so that you could eat, so setting up a dining center, or whether it be setting up like the flagpole, right? Each person has their task and each person has their challenges. But the biggest problem in each group is each group would understand each other's challenges. And so there was this, you come over here to help me. No, you come over here to help me. And it's the leader's job to kind of say, no, like you each have your problems. Let's figure this out. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so you're sort of saying the ignorance comes from the limited perspective that people inevitably have, right? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's the leader's sort of, it's not their job to not be ignorant, but it's like, again, I say it's sort of it's an inevitability of the way that they're positioned because, well, like they are the ones who are in touch with everyone. So, they have, I guess, the least ignorance out of everyone, with regard to what's happening on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd agree
I
with
would
that.
say there's going to be a big issue, though, that you probably see within leadership is a bandwidth issue.
Yeah.
Like you can't fully understand their perspective because you aren't them. But so you have to kind of take this shortened version of like,
Yeah.
this is what this looks like. This is what this looks like. It's like reading a paragraph from 20 books
Yeah.
or reading one book.
Yeah.
Right. You get the base idea. You get really good at everything, but you're not the expert and you can't claim to be.
Right. Right. Yeah. So essentially you're sort of saying the leader's challenge is to summarize everyone's point of view. Right. And I mean, essentially this is why, like this is really why we need people that, we trust and, in whose abilities we trust in key positions because they are spending all their time, working in that position, making decisions in that capacity and then collecting information, the information that comes back. And it's like, that's sort of their full-time bandwidth. And yeah, the leader, like whoever's above, kind of a level up, it's like they are, gathering all those perspectives, all those summarized perspectives and making the best decisions that they can with them. And bandwidth is, it's this unsolvable problem that I see from a lot of the people that I work with. It's like, well, how do you spend your time? Because it's like everyone has the same hours, right? That's a cliche, but it's like in leadership, it becomes this, this especially vicious problem because you have to figure out exactly how much time to put, in certain directions and there's no one who can really do that for you. So it's all sort of based on intuition and, really like, kind of a bet, right? Where it's like, okay, I bet that if I manage my time this way, I'm going to get the best results. So it's like, that's an interesting and big discussion, bandwidth. And it's like, you can't ever be sure that you're doing it right, but it's like, if you could be sure that you were doing it right, then we would know what kind of return we were guaranteed. And that's just not how life works.
Yeah. You can never guarantee anything.
Right. Right. But,
That's
with the
really
leader, it's
problem.
like that, it is that time management issue that, that really brings that into focus where it's like, that's just part of leadership. It's part of being at peace with the leadership game is that it's like, you don't have a boss basically. So it's like, you're managing your time as well as the time of everyone else, underneath you, I call that the double problem of leadership is that you're managing your time and everyone else's and, everyone else then, sort of, is at least somewhat accountable to you, and they don't have to be entirely accountable for their own bandwidth, but like you're the only one as the leader in the organization who's entirely accountable for your own bandwidth,
Yeah. I think the other big issue with being a leader is it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
Right. Because in a leader, you're also a teacher because you have to teach them what to do with their time. And so in like essentially what you're doing in a meeting is when you're leading someone, you're saying, hey, this is what you do. You're essentially teaching them how to do what you're not how to do it, but what to do.
Yeah.
Instead of they may already know how to do it, but you teach them what is the best use of their time.
Sure.
And so if you can't trust the person to do that, then it's like trying to fit like a puzzle piece in a Rubik's Cube together. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, it is a two-way street. I mean, it's like, and, this is, I guess, where where I would start sort of talking about commerce theory, which you heard me talk about this morning, where it's like, yeah, life is all this series of exchanges. Like, it's like, if you're going to be a leader, you're going to have people who are following you. you have expectations of them, but they have expectations of you as well. So that's an exchange. And
Right.
yeah, it's this constant, ongoing, endless dialogue of what they should be doing, how they should be doing it, how they should be structuring that, and then they're going to give you feedback, essentially as to whether you're delegating this, well, and whether you're kind of modeling and demonstrating how they need to do it correctly. And same thing happens with clients and customers. It's like everyone needs each other, or else there is no leadership, there is no organization.
Right. Right. I actually want to. I'll use that as a segue.
Yeah.
To kind of my fourth question here.
Sure.
So like I said, you're writing a new book on commerce theory.
Yeah.
So just assume I'm completely ignorant to this theory.
Sure.
Just walk me through it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's like if I'm starting from scratch. So commerce theory is about how to be better at communication and relationships. And it's like, that's a really, really simple, direct way to say it, but that's what it is. And it starts with the understanding that we are communicative and relational beings, and we can't help but to be that way. And we are that way whether we want to be or not. So every person is, sort of, they find themselves within this, this like practically infinitely intricate and complex network of relationships, and they're all sustained through communication. And it's taking that understanding and asking, so why do people do the things that they do? Because I think that this is a theory that breaks down all of human communication and behavior, and contextualizes it. And through that analysis, it says, okay, if there's a certain result that we want, how do we pursue and achieve that result? And it's always going to be about some interaction between the person who desires the result and other people, whose lives are going to be affected by that result as well. So that's commerce theory in a nutshell.
Correct. Yeah. You have, I guess, 5 tenets, I think is what you call them.
Layers.
That was systems.
Yeah, layers is what I call
okay.
them. Yeah.
Systems and signals, anthropology, sociology, theology, and ontology, I think is how you pronounce it.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
So talk me through systems and signals. Talk me through that one first.
That's actually like the top layer. I mean, yeah, no, this is our
top layer.
We can start in this way. Yeah. How much time do we have? We have like a half hour. Is that right?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to get to?
I had this, and then I was gonna segue into AI because I thought that one was interesting. You had a few.
Yeah, we can talk about AI. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to plan here. How much time do you want to spend on AI? Because I could talk a lot about commerce theory.
We'll give it 15 minutes. So
okay, sure.
Go ham.
Sure. All right. Yeah. So systems and signals. Yeah. So like I often 5-part frameworks I keep track of on my hand. So systems and signals, anthropology, sociology, theology, and then ontology. So systems and signals is the very surface layer. So a signal is anything that we show, and a system is anything that we build to maintain. And essentially, I would assert that all of our behavior, kind of at the moment-to-moment level, all these little decisions that we make throughout the day fall into one or both of those categories. So everything about me, the clothes I'm wearing, the way that I'm groomed, the room that I'm in, it's all signaling something, as is everything that you're doing. And we're all basically sort of taking in information from our surroundings, much of it subconscious, about the way about the reason that things got there and the choices that were made behind those. And so when you're communicating, so from the emails that you write or the logos that you design or the places that you choose to network, the ways that you choose to communicate, you are signaling, you're putting signals out there, and you are looking for people who sort of share the resonance of those signals, and people who resonate with them are more likely to join your group and to support your cause, and people who are repelled by them are going to stay away. So, ultimately, that's what we're putting out all the time. And a system is anything that we build to sort of, sustain and maintain our signaling apparatus in the world. So, so every machine that you build, every platform that you put around something is a signal. And, they happen on all sorts of different levels of social connection, from the platform that we're using right now to the street that goes outside of my house. Like there's all these things that we're sustaining so that we can communicate together within groups. So that's systems and signals.
Okay. So I would say, break this one down for me. So let's say I'm going to the gym every day.
Mm-hmm.
What that would fall into, I would assume, signals and systems.
Yeah.
Because it's signaling that I care about, in a sense, how I look.
That's correct.
And how I feel. And it's a system because I'm doing it every day. So it's a repetitive task to continue to have that signal.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. That's exactly right. So why do you go to the gym every day? Well, and actually, again, so it's like there's always a self answer and there's an others answer, right? So, you get benefits from yourself, right? Like you said, you feel better. You look better when you look, when you look in the mirror. I mean, you also, you're increasing your lifespan, right? And why do you do that? Because you want a longer life so that you can do more things because you like life, right? So it's like that's the ultimate motivation. So you feel better. You personally look better because you have a sense of personal aesthetics, but that's also shaped by the culture at large. And so when you go out in public, with a body that goes to the gym every day, you are signaling to people that you're someone who does that. And so you are going to attract other people who have that valuation, right? That priority as well. And chances are you're going to repel others, who just don't have that priority, right? Or you will be repelled by other people who don't have that priority. So that's sort of how social groups is formed around that. But yeah, correct.
Another funny thing is this definitely shifted by culture. Have you seen the studies where basically guys will rate girls based on their body fat percentage?
I know. So rate girls.
Okay. So here, so this is an evolutionary psychology thing.
Sure.
But when you're in the lower economic status you are, so the lower, essentially less money you make, the more likely you are to rate girls with higher body fat percentages to a point as attractive.
Really?
And here's kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
The thought is that if you're in a lower economic status and you don't necessarily know when the next food, like when your next meal's coming, if you consistently have food, right, you're going to look for someone who you think can survive longer, even if it's like implicit. You don't think it, right? You have that idea. And so if you're higher status, you make more, you know when the food's coming. And so it's more attractive for someone who can control it and kind of be the most healthy that they can in a sense, because you're going to live longer.
You find scarcity in different places, essentially is what you're saying.
Right.
So, and it's like for someone of a higher socioeconomic status, the discipline and the commitment to go to the gym is actually the scarce resource. So, the fact that you can systemize that, means that you're very good at controlling your schedule,
right.
And it's also like, maybe you've heard this, it used to be like the opposite. So it's like when food was more scarce, like being heavier was more desirable in a lot of cultures. So it's interesting the way that's shifted.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things that people don't realize that they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Because it's just subconscious.
Right.
Like you don't even realize it's happening. There's so much like that. That's
why I say most of commerce theory happens at the subconscious level. And there's great power in examining it and bringing it to the surface,
The other tenet what did you say? Layer. Okay.
Yeah.
You got it. That I thought was really interesting. Talk to me about theology.
Sure. Yeah. So that's the second layer, right? So systems and signals, and then in the middle is sociology. Sociology is it's the study of groupings, basically. Socio comes from the word for Latin word socius means friend or ally. So basically, we're going through life, making friends, making allegiances. Anthropology is the way that we kind of conduct those groups, but theology is right below groupings. So yeah, why do I call it theology? Especially since it's not an explicitly religious framework, but it's like, some people say everything's spiritual. Some people say everyone has a religion. Some people say everyone has a belief. I tend to agree with those things. And so, this is where it might be helpful to jump down to ontology for a second. Ontology is the study of being. And actually, you just said you were taking a philosophy class. Are you taking that right now?
No, that was last semester.
Last semester, yeah,
That
because
was,
we
yeah.
actually we had we both took it from the same professor. So ontology is
Yep.
a word from philosophy, which means the study of being or existence, or sort of, it's investigating the question, what is, like, what does it mean to be? And I think, like, I spent a lot of time thinking about that question, like, and just sort of pondering the nature of existence, which I find very strange, very like unlikely, but just this really, really potent, kind of source of feeling. And it's like, it's overwhelming sometimes, where it's like, I exist. I have this quality of existence. Sometimes that's really wonderful. Sometimes that's really hard. But it's something that I have to deal with. It's something that I have to make sense of. It's something that um, I have to respond to, essentially, right? Because, like, part of that existence is living in space and time, which means that my time passes and I have freedom to move around in space. And so I have to make decisions about how to do that. And not only I do, but you have to as well. And everyone else has to do
Uh,
that. And how do we make those decisions? Well, I call them theologies, because, religion is sort of like the most potent crystallized statement of what you think is important to you and how you're going to structure your time. But what I notice is that some people do things that may not necessarily align to their religion, or show that they actually put importance in other ways. And everyone is signaling something about what's important to them by the actions that they're taking, by the friends that they make, the groups that they align with, and the rituals that they enact, which is, the anthropology, issues. So it's like, I could follow anyone around and sort of, create their religion based on their actions. So that's why I say it's theological, kind of at its heart, that human behavior
Interesting.
is at its heart, right? So it's like, we're all going around trying to figure out what is the most possible value we can find in this existence of ours, and that's how we structure our lives. And when we find other people who agree with us, we create a social group with them. Or when we see that promise that resonates us, we join their group, right? And essentially, when we talk about marketing, that's what we're doing, right? But we do this, in all these different levels in our social group. So that's why I use the word theology. I was going to say one other thing, and I might forget it. But anyway, that's why I answered the question that
Okay.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say, so when you're not actually referring to religion itself, you're essentially referring to the idea of people's underlying beliefs.
Not just religion, no, but it's like, religion is
Yeah.
certainly a part of that. And there's an interesting book that I heard about on. Do you know the Lex Friedman podcast, Andrew?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
Yeah. So if you listen to, like, this is a big key to unlocking this. If you listen to his interview with Mark Andreessen, who was this,
Okay.
this tech billionaire, he said, like, one of the most influential books to him is called The Ancient City, which was written in the 1800s by some French guy with a really long name who, was like a prodigy in ancient languages, and read all the ancient Roman and Greek sources, and basically reconstructed what life was like before the Greek and Roman empires. And he said it was basically cults, cults at the family level, cults at the societal level.
Oh,
Everything was sort of built around religion. And he's like, well, I still see that, it's like everything is sort of a
yeah.
weakened form of it, even the religions we have today, it's nothing like being religious in the 1500s, but essentially, like, that's what human life is. It's a series of exchanges with other people, and we're creating rituals, as we do it, and signaling and systemizing those rituals. Here's one other piece about the theology thing, right? Where it's like, everything is theological. And here's one of the ways I know it, because it's like, if you go walk down the street, and let's say you pass the courthouse, you pass the retail store, you pass the church, they all have the same landscaping, right? Where it's like, oh, I like the hosta, right? So it's like, it looks good in front of all of those, right? So it's like, landscaping is part of everyone's theology. It's a part of the signal that they send about, what places to go are important, and that we want them to feel good when we go there, So, yeah.
Right. It's like, I'm just going to take this into marketing perspective because that's what I'm good at.
You're gonna
But
take it into what? Oh, marketing. Yeah.
like a marketing perspective, that's the
Sure.
idea
Yeah.
of
Of
brand.
course.
You're
Uh-huh.
creating just like a religion around your brand. That's
Correct.
something that you see. Let's say we're talking about clothing, for example. Like, you have something like a really high level brand like Louis Vuitton or something.
Yeah.
Like, everyone associates luxury with it.
Mhm.
Even if,
Notice the word
like,
you use, associate, right? That's the central layer. Yeah.
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 That's the idea of brand, right?
Mhm.
Because even if it's not the exact same product, you can essentially like transpose that brand on it just by slapping a logo on it.
Yeah,
That's the
right.
entire idea of it.
Yep.
Because like for a B2B business or a service business, we'll put it in a service business.
Yeah.
It's the relationship that you're putting the brand on.
Yeah.
It's not even necessarily the quality of work. It's the relationship associated with it.
Largely, yes.
Because
Yeah.
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 It's the perceived value. That's all it is.
Yeah. That's right. I think that, and this gets into, interesting questions about the importance of the quality of your service versus the quality of the relationship. I think they're both important, but it's, it's like, there's a lot of reasons that people will choose like one plumbing company over another, or one financial advisor over another. Yeah. And, these are all deep value calculations that you signal in many, many different ways.
Yeah. And most of them are unconscious, which is the funny part. Most people don't even realize they're doing it.
That's right. Until they talk to someone like us. Yes.
Yeah. One thing that I wanted to hear your thoughts on as well, kind of in the same sect of this, is so let's say someone's going let's say someone buys a Ferrari and they realize it's not as valuable as it's made out to be. Like it's just like a toy and it breaks down more and that's all it is. But they saw it as like this status symbol, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to that person when they realize like this isn't as valuable as it's made out to be?
Okay. Yeah. I guess and this is sort of, this is a therapeutic question. And really you can ask this question about many, many things. Because it's like essentially this game of branding and marketing that we're talking about here. It's projecting into the marketplace the signal that people will find a higher state of valuation if they get closer to our brand, right? And valuation is what, and we were talking about this morning a little bit, at the networking meeting. It's like, valuation is a better and better feeling, right? So like that's sort of what we're all going through life pursuing, is something that's going to make us feel better than we do right now. And it's like, what do we think that's going to feel like? I don't quite know, like maybe that's something I have to think about. But basically sales it's helping someone to imagine that better feeling, coming down. And, a Ferrari may well do that in a lot of ways. I mean, high performance cars it's just not something I have a whole lot of experience with. It's just, it's sort of outside of my domain. It's not something I've ever pursued. So it's like, having a Ferrari may very well, give this great feeling to your life when you're, like driving it and, feeling the power and the sleekness of the machine. But
I think
do you have a response to that?
Part of it is perspective, though.
Okay.
Right, because a lot of people will chase like that luxury style just for the sake of having that.
Yeah.
And once you get it, it kind of feels hollow.
Sure.
Like that's kind of more what I'm trying to get at there.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's like sometimes they say like, oh, that's a whole hour right there. But I think the question then, and like this is the question that religion seeks to answer, right? Is like, well, why does life feel hollow like that? Why do the things that people promise us and B that we think are going to fulfill us, like why do they so often let us down? And where can we reliably go to find really things that are abiding and and truly valuable and enduring? And that it's like there's a few different ways to approach that question. I've heard that answered in different ways. Like people who are religious will tell you that they find it in their religion. But what I notice is that every religion that you can find will have people who have left it. So it's like that can't be the universal answer. Otherwise, you'd have one religion and people would find it and they would just, that would grow and grow and grow and that would be the only one, right? But that's not how religions work. So, that shows me that it is largely a matter of allegiance. And so it's like, okay, well, if even religion won't give that to you, then, where do we find it? I mean, I think it's in the ways, it's like all the wisdom is cliched and it's very simple, but I think it's true. It's figuring out the people that you love. It's figuring out the people that you want to take care of. It's figuring out the causes that you believe in. And it's spending time with those. It's promoting those. It's being with those people. And it's figuring out what's going to make them happy and fulfilled. And, maybe you have that with someone in a Ferrari. Like, I don't want to discount that, because I think that, people can bond over many, many things. Um, but I think that it's always being mindful of the level of connection you're having with other people and what that's premised on. I think, and again, it feels trite, but it's like
True.
commerce. It's like, yes, what are you exchanging with people? A
Mhm.
relationship is always an exchange, and you have all these words that have com built onto them, like communal, community, communion,
True.
compadre, companion, right?
Yeah.
It is about the people that you're with, and the ultimate value that you seek together. And again, I don't want to say you can't find that with a Ferrari, but it's like, um, if you're, yeah, okay, so it's like, if someone looks at that Ferrari and feels like that's going to solve their existential void, how do you know it's not? I'm not quite sure, like, but
Yeah.
I think it's like,
Yeah.
it's about the people, primarily, I
I
guess.
think it's what are you optimizing for in life?
Uh-huh.
Because the reality is, like, life is short and there's only so many things you can optimize for,
True. Yeah.
right? And so it's what do you think is going to bring you, and I'm just going to use the terminology that I've always heard. It's like, what's going to satisfy you the most in life? Like, what are you aiming for? What do you really truly want? And there's a lot of, like, I'm going to be honest, I don't even know exactly what I want yet, but
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have to think about it. There's a lot of thinking that you have to do to find where are you going to be the best off, in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Like, where.
Yeah. Well, and I would quickly say, that that is like that is essentially what my coaching conversations are like. It's like, what do you care about the most, and what do you desire the most, and are you sure, and how do you know that? And then when we're really very well certain, then we find
Amen.
an aligned plan to get there. Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
speak my language for
That's
sure.
that was kind of what Jordan Peterson says in
Yeah.
his, I think it's 12 Rules for Life, when he essentially just says aim single-mindedly at what's meaningful to you. Essentially, that was one of is aim single-mindedly at something, I think is what it
Yeah.
was, but
Yes.
find that thing first and then go for it. Just go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Does he? Yeah. And I haven't read. I mean, I know Jordan Peterson somewhat well, but I haven't read that book. Do you feel like he gives you good advice for discerning what that is?
I wouldn't say he dives super deeply into it, but he definitely notes that you have to think about it first. And there's a couple of other rules in there that I think are really good and kind of dive into that. There's a lot of I would say the book, by and large, a 10 out of 10. I would recommend both of them, both Beyond Order and 12 Rules for Life. I'm midway through rereading 12 Rules for Life, so that's why I
Okay.
brought that one up.
Uh-huh.
But I would say I would give them a read, because there's some parts of the rules that I'm like, I'm not so confident on. But
Okay.
by and large, I think it's really, really good for people to read.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think, the meaning conversation's not new. Like, it's actually probably the oldest
Yeah.
conversation there is, but it's like, we we need to keep having it, and we need to keep having it with people who have done a lot of discernment around this, and you know have a good sense of the nuance and the complexity of that question. Is what I would say.
I think that's really interesting. I want to bring this up. We're just gonna ditch the AI conversation
Oh,
for
all
now.
right.
But but here's an evolutionary psychology idea of
Mhm.
what you're essentially doing from an evolutionary perspective is you're not optimizing for your offspring. You're optimizing for your offspring's offspring.
Ah, okay.
Because if you take care of your kids, right, and your kids grow up to be great, what you're also trying to do is to make sure that your kids can raise kids.
Yeah.
And so it's just this never ending, like, hold on the line. And I wonder, like, a lot of people that I see are the happiest once they have kids, in a sense of, like, they feel like they've completed something from, like, just a biological perspective. Like, that just, I'm sure it feels great, right? But there's also people who don't want to have kids,
Yeah.
but also want to help everyone else. So in a sense, they're helping other people's kids.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Where, what would you say in that? How would you draw the line of that? Like, would you say that having kids and helping the kids is an argument for the meaning of someone's life? Or would you say it's still going to be variable depending
Okay.
on who you are?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't know, I feel like we could find our way to AI from here, but uh, yeah, boy, you really do ask big, interesting questions. Let me ask you quick.
Yeah.
How is it that you have such a sense of evolutionary biology? I think that's very interesting.
I so I got into it from the Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris Williamson.
Okay.
That's basically one of his hobbies, and I
Yeah.
watched it enough that I got interested in it, and
Yeah.
so now I'm reading books on it.
Okay. I see.
I got hooked from a podcast.
Yeah. 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 Do you find, I mean, do you feel like it helps you to be a better marketer, understanding evolutionary psychology?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
I'm interviewing
I
you now
think,
a little bit, and I haven't forgotten your question, but I'd be interested to hear your
yep.
response to that. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So,
Yeah.
okay, here's what I find really funny.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So, Chris Williamson I believe he has his master's in marketing. I know it's a business degree, so he has a lot of marketing. And so he has this really big podcast called Modern Wisdom, and the entire thing is it's him exploring essentially the questions we're asking now, like what's the meaning of life, what's this, what's that, and it's whatever is interesting to him. And so he ropes a lot of things into marketing. And one of the things that I found is people care about what's going to make them feel good. And so everything that you learn in evolutionary psychology is essentially what makes people feel good, from the sense of how does it make their offspring feel? And not even necessarily their kids, like I said, like their grandkids and everything.
Yeah.
And so you can layer that and go, hey, how does this affect someone psychologically to make them feel good? Because then they're more likely to buy.
Yeah.
One of them is, if someone has kids, for example, let's say you have a mother and she's working in business, be anything, giving them the ability to feel like they can take time to spend more time with their kid, even if they don't realize it, like telling them that you are giving them time back, just plays to them. Like they just feel really good about it. And I wouldn't say this is as much about guys. Like there's definitely sex differences. So marketing to girls and marketing to guys is going to be different.
Sure.
And that's another really funny thing. And we can get into this. Part of this I actually learned in one of my marketing classes. I think it's Kirk. I don't know how to say his last name, but what you do is you create demographics. And so from an evolutionary perspective, the two main demographics are male and female, because psychologically they're different. The females are more choosy than males when it comes to their partners.
Yep.
And that's not exactly, they're both choosy, but females are more choosy.
Yeah, I've heard this.
And so knowing these differences, you can market to different, depending on what it is.
Sure.
I would say it would probably help me more if I was in like something that was like, I'm in websites, right? Websites you can market to literally anyone.
Yeah.
But when it comes to like the one-on-one conversations, it makes it a lot easier because I can play more towards what they're going to be more biologically wired for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, everything's on a bell curve. So it's not like it's a rule, right? There's going to be tapers on either side.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like it probably helps you a lot, like in ways that you don't fully realize, like, playing on the theme of what's subconscious, like, that's quite prevalent here today. But okay, so you asked me a question. So essentially okay, so it's like you said evolutionary psychology, essentially it's about optimizing, not for yourself, not for your kids, but for your grandkids, right? And so, your question was something like, can children, satisfy the meaning question for people? And then, if people don't have children, or it's sort of like, it doesn't have to be either or, right? Is that right? Um,
I guess kind of the better way to phrase it,
yeah,
and just kind of back is, can kids in general, not even if they're necessarily yours,
yeah.
but can
Oh,
be your offspring, be the meaning of life?
uh,
Like,
and
there's definitely a case to be made, because no matter what you do, let's say you're getting capital. Why are you getting capital? You want status, you want power. Why do you want status and power?
yeah,
Well, maybe it's for your kids, even if you don't realize it. Because a lot of times, status and power, who does it affect? It affects the people around you. Who's around you
right,
the most? Your family, your kids.
yeah, yeah.
And
Well, are you asking though? Are you also asking? Can like even if you don't have personal children of your own, can you see the propagation of society as a form of your offspring? Is that what you're asking too?
yeah, essentially.
Okay. Yeah. 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 No, these are interesting questions, and I wish I had like more than 2 minutes to like get into this because it's like I don't know that I have like clear answers to these things. I think I mean children are clearly a sense of meaning. It's like, and I do have children. It's impossible for me to remember what it was like in my mind before I had children, and um, I think that for me, I feel like children make the success sweeter and they make the defeats harder. Like they make it feel more urgent. And personally, I do see meaning in the work that I do in addition to my children. Um, Sometimes people talk to me like it's sort of one or the other, or it's like they don't feel like their work is as meaningful as their children, and I sort of ask them, well, why can't it be both? Like why can't you find some sort of like interesting intellectual and brand distinction in what you do in addition to your children? Now, as to whether people find meaning from just sort of propagation of society and whether they see meaning in other people's children, I think probably. And again, I'll kind of look to commerce theory a little bit here. I think people find meaning in groups, and so it's like I can think about people who are very motivated, very good at what they do, and it's like perhaps they're married but they don't have children. It's like the marriage is meaningful, so it's like that provides a sense of meaning and a motivation for success. But society is meaningful to them too. Just because they're human, it's like that's the group that we're all part of. And so I think that is meaningful for people on a subconscious level to see the human species succeed and thrive into the future. And I think that's why AI is so turbulent for people, is because they see it as highly destabilizing, disorienting, even threatening to that effort. And they're not sure what that's going to do to the next couple generations, because things are changing so quickly, and we have to figure out our sort of our intellectual territory. Like faster and to a lower degree of certainty than we ever have had to before. And then to respond to one other thing that I think I heard in what you said, yeah, I don't think people ever pursue status or wealth for their own sake, because in and of themselves they're not meaningful. They're meaningful for the influence and the power that they permit them to create and enact and influence other social groups, and to have experiences that are permitted by other social groups. I think that's ultimately what I think that is what is valuable about them. And I guess as a final note to this whole question, and maybe commerce theory, and like really quickly, I feel like the ultimate feeling everyone is looking for is a sense of, I call it ontological completion. There's that fundamental level of ontology. It's like completion at the level of being, and wealth and status are only valuable in as much as they help people do that, and they often do,
Right.
to a certain degree. So that's my answer to that.
That's kind of why they call it a status symbol.
Yeah,
Right? It's a signal.
it's
That's
a
all it
signal.
really
Yep,
is.
it's all signals. Yes.
All right. On that note, I fortunately don't have a whole lot more time. So, Aaron, where can people find you?
Sure. You can go to aaronjmarx.com. That's sort of a central place. You can also look for me on all the socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I have a YouTube channel that gets a lot of views.
Okay.
Also have two podcasts, myself, one solo podcast and one with a good friend named Todd Kuka, and we talk about company culture. And and you can find my book and a whole lot of articles online.
Awesome. Thank you.